2017 was a year in which I didn't end up posting that many videos, which one of my resolutions for this year is to post more content, so hopefully that'll work out. Alternatively, something that I don't really give a shit about working on is the fact that I didn't see that many new movies last year. I mean, if I end up seeing more this year, fine. If I don't, fine. Anyway, I only ended up seeing a grand total of 11 movies from 2017, so rather than doing a top 10, since it's really not saying much, I'm going to talk about all 11 movies that I saw in order from the one that I liked the least to the one that I ended up liking the very most. My number 11 movie is one that's going to surprise some of you because right after I saw it, I told some of my friends, oh my god, this is so good, you should see it. But the more I think about it, the more I realize that it's just like the first time I saw Suicide Squad. Going into that movie, I legitimately thought that it was great, but now it's basically been reduced to guilty pleasure status, and the Book of Henry isn't even a guilty pleasure for me. I will admit there are still some things that I sort of admire about it. I still think that it's a very beautiful film to look at. It's well acted, and I'd be lying if I said that it didn't manage to get some tears out of me at one point. However, the characters are written in such a way that cloying is basically an understatement. I mean, the character of the cool mom and the smart kid are written in such a way that it's almost as if they're turning to the camera and forcing the audience at gunpoint to fall in love with them. Plus, so much that happens in the second act relies so heavily on convenience. There's one point where this guy is supposed to hear a whistle from outside his house for things to go into motion. And I mean, what if he was watching TV, listening to music, taking a shower, or even sleeping? The whole second act relied entirely on him sitting there in silence. It was just absurd. Plus, there's a scene in the movie where Sarah Silverman, a grown woman, uh, gives this little boy a long kiss. And I mean, just imagine if the roles were reversed and you saw a grown man giving a 12-year-old girl a really long kiss. You would get pretty uncomfortable pretty fucking fast. Number 10 is a movie that I considered putting at the bottom of the list, but the more I think about it, the more I realize it's really not all that bad. It's just wholly unremarkable. I mean, I'd be pretty shocked if I saw the Nostalgia Critic or Your Movie Sucks talking about The Hitman's Bodyguard at length. No offense if you saw The Hitman's Bodyguard and liked it. There are some enjoyable aspects to it for sure. It's just there's really nothing amazing about it. I mean, Ryan Reynolds and Samuel Jackson do a really good job in the movie, and the comedy is fairly well written. It's just I don't really recall that many moments that had me really laughing out loud. The action scenes were fairly well done. They just weren't amazing. Gary Oldman was serviceable as the villain, but he's not gonna go down, with the Joker or Hannibal Lecter as one of the great film bad guys. The only scene in the movie that I would consider to be, entirely bad is towards the end when Samuel Jackson's character is in court and he just gives this very forced exposition about his backstory. And really, that's the only terrible thing in the movie. Overall, it's just very middle of the road. Number 9 is a movie that I actually enjoyed. To be honest, Power Rangers isn't a show that I was really into as a kid. My main gripe with it was the fact that every time the monsters talked, you wouldn't see their mouths moving. So even at a very young age, I was just like, huh, that's very obviously a man in a mask. This is stupid. Moving on. And I would change the channel. But when this new movie came out, my friends wanted to go see it, and I thought I'd go ahead and tag along. I thought it could be fun, especially with modern technology. And as it is, one of my main gripes with it is that the giant monster which appears at the end doesn't look all that cool. And there are some jokes in the movie that just kind of get on my nerves. Like at the beginning, there's a joke about milking a bull, which made me think I'd walked into an Adam Sandler flick on accident, but still, it was pretty fun overall. The action was very well done. The characters were very likable as a whole, and I really enjoyed Rita Repulsa as this very over the top sort of villain. So it was definitely worth a watch. On the flip side, something that I did love as a kid was the Captain Underpants books, and when I found out that they were finally coming out with this movie adaptation, I was pretty excited. The film has a very fast-paced comedic energy going for it, and the thing that I love the most about it was just the sheer strangeness. There are scenes where it switches animation styles, and I even love this one scene that's done entirely with sock puppets. It's probably the funniest part of the movie for me. One thing that I was ready to hate at first was the fact that there is a minor romantic subplot involving the principal, Mr. Krupp, but really that just serves to humanize the character, whereas in the books he was just a one-note evil principal. The only reason that this movie is low on my list is when I look at it, there's really not that much that will appeal to adults. I mean, it's not all kid humor. There are things that are likely to make you laugh if you're a grown up. It's just, it's not like Lion King or Inside Out where you're going to really get into the emotional depth of the story of Captain Underpants. But if you're into really creative, silly humor, then it does come recommended. Speaking of book adaptations, the remake of It is definitely a film that I felt cautiously optimistic about. I mean, on the one hand, the trailers did look fairly interesting, and while I do really like the miniseries, there's definitely room for improvement, and I felt like there could have been a better adaptation of the book made. However, we've had instances in the past where people have taken sort of okay movies and remade them into absolute garbage, such as with A Stranger Calls and Prom Night. But as it turns out, I walked out of it really liking it. For one thing, it's a great coming of age story. The child actors in the film are excellent. They're very hilarious, and the moments of dramatic tension are very well done. There are, of course, some characters aren't who don't stand out as much as others, but when you have, so many people to follow, there are some who are likely to sort of get left by the wayside. And it's also a pretty decent horror movie. Pennywise is just creepy as shit, and I like how the film didn't shy away from some of the more disturbing aspects of the source material. My one major complaint is that there are some moments where the scares kind of fall flat and it comes off as just more silly than scary. There were some parts at the same time where it was riding the line between the two where I actually enjoyed it quite a bit, such as the scene where Pennywise started waving with that little severed arm. I actually kind of loved that moment. But then you've got just these really strange scenes like why are the balloons floating in a triangle shape? Why is Pennywise doing that stupid dance? And what's with the three doors? The three doors where they say really scary, scary, and not scary at all. I mean, that latter door pretty much defined the scene. Wonder Woman was a very excellent superhero movie, and there's really not much I can say about it that hasn't already been said. I mean, Diana was a very likable and badass character, certainly someone that people can look up to. The action scenes were very well done. Easily my favorite in the movie was the battle on the beach on the Amazon island. As is the case with everyone else, I wasn't very impressed with the villains. However, one case where I do sort of defer is that the only one who stood out to me was Dr. Poison. I mean, when you look at her character, the gas that she created was legitimately threatening. She looked creepy, and her over-the-top acting made her fun. On the other hand, the German guy was just boring, and Ares, the god of war, was not only boring, but entirely miscast. I'm not going to give away the actor who plays him, but he's not exactly the face that comes to mind when you're thinking of someone who can be badass and terrifying. Well, it turns out that I don't have quite enough storage space on this phone to do the rest of the video right now, so I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up, upload this to YouTube, and then do a part 2 where I basically talk about my top 5 movies of the year. Anyway, I'll see you then.